The French government announced last week that it would supply the Ukrainian army with AMX-10RC combat vehicles. However, the announcement did not specify how many AMX-10RCs were on their way or when they would arrive on the battlefield. In the 1970s and 1980s, the country produced 325 AMX-10RCs for the French army. At the moment, the country is replacing them with a new model. The aging AMX-10RCs have wheels and light armor in addition to a large caliber tank gun. The wheeled armored combat vehicle known as the AMX-10RC It has 4 crew members, 6 road wheels, and a 105mm cannon and 2 7.62mm machine guns in its turret. The vehicle only weighs 16 tons and is lightly armored. It can also safely operate in environments containing nuclear, chemical, or biological warfare. The addition of thermal imaging sights to approximately 250 AMX-10RC made it possible for them to engage hostile targets at night, in adverse weather, or through smoke screens. Is it a tank? Some people look at the AMX-10RC and see the big gun and turret and call it a tank. Others look at everything below the turret and call it a light armored vehicle. Merriam-Webster defines a tank as an enclosed, heavily armed and armored combat vehicle that moves on tracks. Meanwhile, self-propelled combat vehicle, armed with cannon and machine guns and moving on a caterpillar tread. The U.S. Army, in its typical muscular prose, describes the American M1A2 Abrams main battle tank as a full-tracked, low-profile, land combat assault weapon enabling expeditionary warfighters to dominate their adversaries through lethal firepower, unparalleled survivability, and audacious maneuver. The AMX-10RC is heavily armed by Merriam-Webster's definition, but lacks the heavy armor and tracks that the dictionary site specifies. The U.S. Army mentions tracks, and though the AMX-10RC arguably has lethal firepower and audacious maneuver abilities, its thin armor rather than unparalleled survivability disqualifies it from being a true tank. History. Since the 1960s, the French army has had 2 primary missions. The first is to defend France and its allies from Soviet, and later Russian, attack. In this case, the adversary is a Russian army fielding T-90 tanks and BMP-3 infantry fighting vehicles. In order to defeat that threat, the French need tanks and vehicles that can destroy other tanks. The second mission is to stabilize and secure the vastness that is French Africa, which requires light, fast-moving armor that can fan out across hundreds of square miles of villages and towns connected by poor road infrastructure, quickly projecting French military might. In the 1980s, a 16-ton wheeled armored vehicle armed with a 105mm gun seemed like a good weapon for both missions. The gun could engage Soviet, and later Russian, tanks from the flanks and rear, while destroying vehicles like the BMP-3 head-on. In Africa, the tank's high speed and mobility could allow it to reach remote locations, while the menacing 105mm gun would dissuade local guerrillas from attacking. It's also important to look at the French army and how it uses the AMX-10RC. The French army has never used it in actual tank units, where the locally made AMX-30 and Leclerc main battle tanks fill the ranks. Instead, it uses them in Hussar and Chasseur, light cavalry units, light armored units, and other non-tank units. In other words, it uses them for cavalry and reconnaissance roles. To top it off, the AMX-10RC is being replaced by the EBRC Jaguar, a real armored reconnaissance vehicle that lacks a large cannon, instead being armed with a 40mm automatic cannon and MMP anti-tank missiles. Maneuverability. The Hispano-Suiza HS-115-2 was the first engine for the AMX-10RC. It was a multi-fuel, liquid-cooled, supercharged V8 with 190 kilowatts, 250 horsepower at 3,200 RPM. As a production cut-in 1985, The Baudouin 6F11 SRX supercharged diesel engine was chosen to power the final production AMX-10RC vehicles and, eventually, all French Army AMX-10RC vehicles. The French Army uses this engine, which has 220 kilowatts, 300 horsepower, but only 190 kilowatts, 250 horsepower at 3,000 RPM. The standard electrical system consists of 6 12-volt, 100 ampere-hour batteries. Water propulsion is accomplished by mounting 2 water jets, one on each side of the hull at the rear. An unidentified pre-selector gearbox with 4 forward and 4 reverse gear ratios is utilized in the AMX-10RC vehicles. The gearbox has a torque converter and an electromagnetically operated clutch. The 2 water jets are operated by a power takeoff unit, skid-steered and capable of turning in a pivot. The AMX-10RC can turn. Messier Auto Industry supplied the hydropneumatic suspension system for the 6x6 AMX-10RC, which has variable tilt and ground clearance. The tire inflation and lubrication systems are centralized. At each wheel station, a shock damper is installed. Operational. As of 2004, the French Army had some 300 AMX-10RC examples currently deployed in the field. Morocco has purchased 228 vehicles of their own, with 120 of these being upgraded models, though original AMX-10RCs were known to have the waterjet propulsion facilities installed. Qatar has purchased 12 systems. The AMX-10RC, as a whole, has proven itself in many combat actions and is respected as a good design of French origin. Its success is such that the system is intended to be of some service to the French government and army for the near future. Though GIAT no longer produces the type in any form, there was an AMX-10RC driver trainer variant of the base AMX-10RC combat model made.